Hello, and welcome to this Accelerator session, Tools to Go Circular, at the World Circular Economy Forum. I'm here together with Hedda and Alexander in the studio. They are from industry and strategy and sustainability at Accenture. And together with us, we have Jyri Arponen from Sitra as well, on a link from Helsinki. Nordic Innovation is an organization under the Nordic Council of Ministers. Our task and role is to help companies with sustainable growth, innovation, and value creation. In the circular economy, we wanted to help them to take circular economy from strategy to action. And to help us with this, we had the team from Accenture and Sitra, and we worked together to make this circular economy playbook. And Accenture managed this program for us, where we had companies involved in the process and learning about this method to go from a circular linear value chain, a linear value chain, to a circular one, and to a circular business model. I'm very happy to welcome you all to this seminar. And with this few words of introduction from me, I would like to ask Jyri Arponen. Jyri, are you here with us? Would you like to say a few introductory words from Sitra on this circular business models and the Nordic Circular Economy Playbook?
Yes, thank you, Marthe, and thank you for the Nordic Hotspot and Nordic Innovation. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been a very nice process to do this with you. As we all know, it's an last century for ecological reconstruction, and we all have to change. Companies has to change, and it's not anymore only about mitigating the emissions or resource efficiency, but we also have to change the way we are conducting business. So, and the core is the business model, changing that. What is the value for the customer, and how we can enhance that. And as you know, process industry have had the ecological industry models like industrial symbiosis for decades, and now actually it's easier also for manufacturing companies to start to change the way they do business. And with this circular economy playbook, you can create a viable business case and start to figure out what is the best model for us. And we've been doing this actually first with manufacturing companies, and then with the chemical industry, and then with smaller companies, and then with Nordic Innovation. And now we have found out that this is suitable for all companies. So now today you hear about the tools, which are actually excellent tools to make this come real. And it's very nice to be part of this. Thank you very much. And yes, I hope you join this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jyri, for that introduction. Really happy to have you with us and to have had you on board in all of this project. That's been really a pleasant and very useful thing. Now over to Hedda, Industry and Sustainability Consultant at Accenture, who will present the tools and talk us a little bit through the playbook and how you can use it. Please enjoy. And perhaps I forgot to mention, please send us questions. If you have any questions, send them in the chat, and we will take them up and answer some questions at the end. And there will also be some polls for you to answer during a later stage in this 45-minute seminar. Thank you. Please go ahead, Hedda.
Thank you, Marthe. Today I will just quickly go through the playbook, introducing the topic, but I will focus the majority of the session on the approach and actually the tools. How are companies using this? And then after this, we'll have a bit of a discussion on how companies are using this practically. We'll have some reflections on the value it creates, and we'll also have a Q&A session. But before going into the playbook, just to do a short recap of circular economy and the importance. Because we know today that our linear value chain generates inefficiencies. It generates inefficiencies when we use unsustainable material that cannot be recycled at the end of life. There's also inefficiencies when we are not fully utilizing our products or when we are scrapping our products too early. And there are also inefficiencies when we actually fail to engage the customers throughout the value chain. And the circular economy aims at addressing these inefficiencies. And it addresses these inefficiencies through 5 different circular business models. And just to do a short introduction of these, we have business models that looks more sort of on the design manufacturing stage of the product. So what we have called circular inputs. So designing the product for circularity and using material that can be recycled at the end of life. We also have business models that focus more on the product use phase. So we have sharing platforms that allows users to share access to products that are often idle. Or we have product use extension business models that aims at prolonging the life of a product through repair, remanufacturing, or reuse. We also have resource recovery, looking at capturing all of the products at the end of life and looping the materials and the components back into the life cycle. And finally, we have product as a service, where you actually shift from selling products to leasing products. And this immediately incentivizes a longer lifetime of the product. So this was just briefly about the circular business models that this playbook is founded on. I can now move a bit more into the playbook, what it is. So just as a short introduction, the playbook is a hands-on asset that helps companies explore how to pivot to a circular economy. It looks at how you can identify a circular opportunity and detail this towards a pilot phase. And this playbook combines methodology and circular know-how. It combines practical examples of how companies are now employing circular business models. And it also employs different kind of tools and frameworks to actually help you on this journey. And this playbook really targets all companies. And it was based on sort of the workshops that we have done together with Nordic manufacturing companies. But it is really applicable to other countries and to other industries as well. So just want to highlight that. And just to double click a bit on the companies that actually contributed and participated in this workshop. So for 2 years now, we have engaged over 100 organizations across the Nordics in delivering and developing this playbook. And we have engaged different kind of companies, from manufacturing companies, energy companies, but we also have engaged the more of the enabling actors, such as financial institutions and other organizations, regulatory bodies, for example. So I really created this kind of ecosystem that is necessary for a circular transformation. So that was very brief about the playbook, but I would like to spend really the majority of the time discussing the approach and discussing the tools that you can use on your journey. Because the playbook follows a 5-step approach, and each chapter addresses one of these steps, as you can see on this slide. And I will double click a bit on each of these steps now, but just to focus on the high-level process, we generally say that you start out by defining a vision. So what is my vision for the circular economy in my company? We then move to the what. So what kind of opportunities is relevant for my company and what kind of value can it bring? Then we look at how we actually are going to implement this idea. So we'll look at what kind of capabilities are required, what kind of technologies are required, what kind of technologies, capabilities do I have today, and where are my gaps? And then finally, we look at the roadmap, because we know that there are today a lot of barriers for employing circular economy. So it's important to identify these barriers and address this in a roadmap on how to actually overcome this. So this was just the high level approach. And throughout the whole playbook, we use the business model canvas. And the business model canvas, the purpose is to help you crystallize your circular business idea, looking at what is my market, what should be my offering, what should be my target operating model. And throughout the chapters, it's highlighted where you actually can fill in the business model canvas. So you will be guided throughout the whole process, so to say. But now let's just double click on the different steps that we have in the playbook. So we look at the first step, defining our vision for the circular economy. So here companies typically start by looking at what kind of trends are in the market and how are these affecting me. So what are the customer trends? What are the technological trends? What are the regulatory demands? And how are these trends affecting my strategy and my approach to a circular economy? So just let's take a case example. Let's say that I'm a manufacturer. I'm selling gardening equipment to customers. I would then here discover that sustainable materials is very important for my customers. It's not only something they wish, it's something that they require. So it's obvious that my vision needs to target how do I actually bring in more sustainable material into my product offerings. So that would be sort of my vision. When I have that, I move into the next phase, which is what we call screen opportunities. So here I would first start to look at what kind of waste occurs in my linear value chain. Are there waste within my materials? Is it waste within how my customers are using the products? Or is it, for example, waste occurring at the end of life? So you need to pinpoint these. And then the next step would be to actually look at what kind of circular business models apply to my inefficiencies and addresses these. And then it's also very important here to understand the benefit of circular economy. And on a high level, we see that the circular economy can generate benefits within 4 different dimensions. So more tangible benefits such as cost reduction or revenue increase, or more intangible benefits such as brand enhancement and risk reduction. And in this, in the playbook, there's actually some tools that you can use for this, and these can be downloaded from Nordic Innovation's website. So we have what we call the Business Model Development Toolkit, which will help you identify inefficiencies in your value chain, and also looking at what kind of circular opportunities can address these. And then we also have a value case assessment tool. So it's a high-level business case tool that will actually help you calculate estimated revenues, estimated cost, and estimated investment requirements from your circular opportunity. So let's go back to my case example. I'm the manufacturer of gardening equipment. So I now have here discovered that I have quite a lot of inefficiencies in terms of my supply chain because I use material that cannot be recycled. So I identify circular inputs as an aid to actually help resolve my inefficiencies. And here I would need to look at both how I design the products and what kind of materials. And in terms of the value, I would discover that this circular business model actually can increase my brand because the customers are really demanding this. So this is just an example of how a company would look at this. Next, you will move on to actually, how can I implement this? So I have identified my opportunity, I have identified value, but how do I just take this further? So here we would then look at capability gaps. Because we all know that the circular business model requires a whole new set of capabilities, ranging to how I'm dealing with my customers, to how I'm managing materials in my supply chain, how I manage my products at the end of life, but also more in terms of my organization. What is my culture? How do I actually sort of employ change management to actually embed circularity into my organization? And here we also have a tool that will help you on this journey. So in the playbook, you can utilize a tool called the Capability Maturity Assessment. So based on the circular business model, as the circular business opportunities that you have identified, you can look at what kind of capabilities is required for this specific opportunity. And then you can also measure your maturity and assess the gap. Do you, for example, need to close this gap? So let's again take the gardening equipment example. So here as a company, I would identify that I need to improve my capabilities on how I manage my resources. So I need to, for example, be able to track the material going through the supply chain. But I also need to advance my cultural capabilities because I know that circularity is not as embedded in my company as I would like. Then we have the next step. Step 4, how to look at technologies. What kind of technologies can I employ to actually implement this circular business opportunity? Because we know today that technology plays a huge role in actually being able to scale circular business models and realize value. And we have a whole range of technologies that are available today, ranging from digital technologies such as AI, IoT. We have biological technologies looking at materials. And we also have physical technologies such as robotics or 3D printing. And here you would need to identify what kind of technologies do I need for my circular business opportunity, and again, where are my gaps? And again, we have a tool for this in the playbook. It's called the Technology Maturity Assessment, and it's kind of similar as the capability assessment. So you would go in and look at what kind of technologies would help scale my my circular opportunity, and then you would also be able to measure the gap. So where do I have large gaps, and where do I, for example, need to invest in technology? And again, going back to my case example, for example, here for my gardening example, I would identify that I would need some technologies within biological technologies because I need some material technology. I also need some digital technologies because I need to track all of the material going through the supply chain so I can capture my material at the end of life. So just as an example. So now I have identified my opportunity. I have identified what kind of capabilities and technologies are required. And then the next or the final step would be to actually look at the roadmap. Because we all know that employing circular or implementing circular business models, there are quite a lot of barriers. And what the barriers that we typically see are barriers within culture. So getting both your employees and also your customers in understanding the value of circular economy. It's in terms of getting the right funding requirements. So how to actually approach banks and other financial institutions to get funding for your idea. And third, you also have quite a lot of barriers in terms of how to work with your ecosystem. Because it's clear that within circular economy, it cannot be achieved alone. You need to collaborate with actors both within your supply chain, but also actors outside of your supply chain. For example, partnering up with R&D institutions or other similar actors. So the first step here would be then to identify what are my barriers. And we have some tools as well here in the playbook. So we have a tool called culture gap analysis. So here you will be able to actually measure the culture change that is required to embark on the circular economy. You will also, through our ecosystem partner identification tool, be able to identify what kind of partners do I typically need for this idea. And we also have a third tool looking at funding requirements. So helping you identify what kind of funding requirements do I have available, and what are sort of the typical financial institutions that I can approach to secure funding. And then finally, when I have used these tools to understand the barriers, then I need to formulate some actions. So I need to plan both actions in the short term, medium, and long term on how to actually launch my circular opportunity. And here we have our last tool called roadmap development. So this is a tool for planning your transformation journey that will actually help you sort of categorize and plan your actions accordingly. So again, going back to my gardening equipment example, here I would identify that I would need to partner up with some R&D institutions on materials. I would also need to do a significant investment in culture, because I realized that there is actually quite a significant culture gap within my company in terms of understanding circular economy and the value. So this actually summarizes the 5-step approach that we are using, or that can be used. All of these tools can be downloaded from the website of Nordic Innovation. You will also find the playbook there, and the playbook will also guide you on how to use the tools. There's also a description. So I encourage you, if you are interested in understanding more on what kind of circular opportunities there are for your company and how to actually detail this further, I encourage you to have a look at the playbook and also have a look at the tools. So that was a short recap on the playbook and the approach and the tools that we use in the playbook. But now let's take a more practical approach to this topic. And Alexander, you have been working with both Nordic and global companies on transformations. And how do you see that companies are using and can use this playbook to actually realize circular value?
I think it's probably 2 areas, but before going into describing the areas, I think it's important to go back to how this program started back in 2019. It's been a unique program, over 100 companies, and the basis for the program has been the playbook. And of course, it's without going into names of the different companies, it's been small, medium, large organizations in the Nordics participating in this program, more than 100 companies, and all with different maturity level. So we started out with a base model of the playbook, I would say, back in 2019. And of course, throughout the years, we've got feedback, how we can make it more tangible, how we can simplify it. And back to Jyri's point, as he mentioned in the beginning, how to make it as practical and tangible as possible. So I think for me, being fortunate to be part of this program for more than 2 years with Nordic Innovation, Jyri, Sitra, and Accenture, it's been 2 key areas that I would point out. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, but if you're not able to define your strategy and get started, then you won't get started. And the other part is how to identify and also articulate the value of the circular economy and the value around it. So we've gotten great feedback on quite low mature companies on circular economy and sustainability in general that's come to us after the workshop series, using the playbook practically in how they've been working with either top management or even the board to get through their new strategy, build it into existing business models or new business models. So I would say that's really where I've received the most powerful feedback from companies that it's enabled them to really convince and also articulate circularity in a different way, why it's relevant for my company and our company, and then get C-level commitment and board also partners involved. So I think that's the power of the playbook in terms of how tangible it is. So that's one aspect. The other one is around the value. It's quite simple, practical business case areas to really show the value. And we had several companies in the Nordics that's come back during the program that's said, okay, we've been able now to articulate value in a different way, and then get not only management internally with us, but also convince our partners and ecosystem members to go together with us. So that's the two areas I would point out, because if you don't get started with defining the strategy and start building it into your business models, get starting with ideas, and then showing the value of those ideas, then you won't get going. And I think that's really where I feel over the more 100 companies participating in this, where we gotten the most powerful feedback in this from my perspective. Maybe you have also some reflections on that, Marthe.
Yes, no, but I agree really with you. And of course, that is also was the aim to try to help companies go from the strategy to actually action, and to start doing something. And perhaps some have piloted ideas, just start small, and then you can scale later, just to test it during the time they use the playbook and the workshop. So that's been really, really interesting to be part of the workshops where companies have really discussed so much across sectors, across the value chain, and across the competitors perhaps also.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think that's absolutely what we're seeing, that the circular economy is really also about not only partnering up with your sort of existing players in your supply chain, it's also about partnering up with non-traditional partners. And for example, we are seeing examples of how competitors are joining forces in order to, for example, leverage benchmarking data or leverage existing sort of physical infrastructure. So I think that's a very interesting development.
Yes.
We also have Jyri with us. So Jyri, Alexander was mentioning a bit about the value, but would you also like to elaborate a bit on that, on how you see that this playbook brings value to the companies?
Yes, thank you. It was very nice to listen on very concrete issues here we are talking about, and that's very, very good. And that is needed. And that's, I think, the whole secret of a playbook, that you can really uncover the inefficiencies and pain points. And that's something concrete you can start with, because usually companies do know that, hey, we do have these inefficiencies, pain points to the customer, and we do some stupid things, but we haven't actually done anything about it. So it's a good way to start. Also, one thing is also that you find a new, we talk about customer engagements, sort of new ones which you haven't exploited yet. So that's also something which is very concrete. And we all have to understand that companies are in different level in this process of change. All are doing something usually, because you cannot exist if you don't take care of your rubbish and figure out how to behave. And so this cost, risk, and revenue is the driver, has been always for the sustainability. But I think that one driver is now also the brand and the purpose. And now you can really show, you can validate what you are doing and really start to bring this change into your company. So you have to go up in this ladder of change, and the maturity, it varies a lot, but everybody's doing something usually. And then when you start to deploy this new business model, you take another step, a new step, where you really have to figure out how we make this to operate within our functions and processes. And the third one is that you have that in your strategy. Of course, if you have one business model and that's all what your company is doing, then it's easier. But usually you have different type of businesses within your company, so that's a tricky part. And how to engage how to get this alignment. So you have to have some sort of reward in all levels and measure, and you get all these tools from this. So and one thing is still there is of course the mindset change, but also how you use the new technology, how you use data, because that is the key for all of this. So it's very concrete, and we have a lot of cases and examples, but this is something, not an overnight exercise, but an ongoing process. And you can have always tools to use in your process from this one. So I haven't had many negative feedback from this at all, but from big companies, it really applies to all of this.
Thank you, Jyri. That's very good, and I agree totally with you. It's really, really nice. I think we wanted to engage also the audience, so we have some polls for you to answer.
Yes, so we have 3 questions, and the questions will now be displayed. I think it will be then displayed in the upper right corner of your screen. And we will just start out with the first question, just to get some feedback also in terms of how you are understanding the circular transformation journey and where you see the highest potential. So the first question is quite straightforward. So it's how or in which circular business models do you see the highest potential? Is it within circular inputs, sharing platforms, product as a service, product use extension, or resource recovery? So feel free to answer now, and then we'll revert back to the answers a bit later.
Yes. And while waiting for you to answer this poll, I wanted to ask you, because how much did we engage small and medium-sized companies versus larger companies in the development of the Circular Economy Playbook?
That's a good question. I think our aim was always to have a good balance, because we do see the value of sort of pairing smaller and medium-sized companies with the larger corporates as well. So in the workshops we did have startups with for example like 10-20 employees. We had smaller and medium-sized companies that were a bit established, and then we also have the larger Nordic corporates. And I think it worked quite well, because there's always lessons learned across these different companies. And I think for the playbook, it really can be applied to all kinds of companies, because it's of course the process will vary a bit, but you can always utilize the same steps. So we do encourage that whether you're a small, medium, or a large company, that you can look at the playbook. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
I think also the important area throughout the years of this program, back to 2019, the world we were living in was different than in 2020. So the first workshop series across the Nordics was physical. All the companies were meeting in different parts of the Nordics, meeting face to face, which also made it possible for us to get a lot of feedback on how practical, or if it was too much theory or much academic, on how it was used in the different workshops. While then designing it for the 2020, living in the COVID and doing everything over Teams, then of course we need to adapt also the playbook. So I think it's been great also to see how over then 2019 to 2021, how the playbook has evolved, and very much how Nordic Innovation has been seeking also feedback and advice from all the participants. How can we improve it? How can we simplify it? How can we make it as concrete as possible? So I would definitely say that it's constantly been evolving over the last 2 years. And of course, that's been very much also since it's been both small, medium, and large companies also involved in the program.
That is very true. And now we have an answer to the poll. Let's see.
Yeah. So we have, interesting, so we have the majority of our participants actually answered that product as a service is the circular business model with highest potential. I think this is very interesting. This is definitely a business model that we have seen for the last few years now, really coming up as a major driver in the circular economy agenda. It requires a bit more transformation for companies, but it's definitely sort of raised on the agenda for companies now. And then we also have for votes within circular inputs and product use extension, we have around 25%. And these are traditionally the more traditional business models that companies tend to start with on the circular journey. And then we have least votes on sharing platforms with 5%. I think this also makes sense because it's not sharing platforms can be a bit complicated to many companies in terms of moving around assets, etc. So it's more of a niche business model for many.
Very interesting. But we have another question.
Yeah, I think we can launch our second question now. So this is in terms of capabilities. So what kind of capabilities do you see as most important in your circular transformation? So is it within customer value delivery? So how you actually engage and collaborate with your customers? Is it within resource handling? So your ability to actually manage the resources going through your supply chain in terms of your materials and products? Is it in terms of how you're employing new technologies? Or is it within organizational culture? So the need to actually change the organization and also the culture within your own company.
So please vote now.
Yeah.
You have a minute or 1.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And of course, going back to small and medium-sized companies, I think that it's because, now we have kind of engaged some of the front runners in the Nordics, but how could we, and hopefully now others in the world, but how do we reach these companies with the information? Do you have any thoughts about this?
I think that, the playbook, it can be sort of, it's easy to distribute. I think it's quite self-explaining. You have all of the tools and the assets available on the website. So it can definitely sort of be distributed and employed directly. But we also do see, of course, a value of bringing companies together to actually discuss the playbook and discuss their inefficiencies and opportunities. So that sort of would be the next step in actually using the playbook in more sort of workshop settings and grouping companies together to actually work together. But I think it can be used and sort of explored on different levels. Alexander, if you have any.
And I think probably you can connect it to one of the questions that's been coming in, Marthe, on it's not only been individual business or private business, it's also been government-owned companies and organizations involved in the program. I think they have a lot of purchasing power to then start things happening. If it's been on large public transport authorities that's been involved in the program, that has a lot of purchasing power. If you look at the construction industry, has also been involved in the program on government-owned property developers, for instance, how they can also kind of make a big impact in terms of how they are setting a standard. So it's not only private companies, organizations that can utilize this, but if we also get the governmental companies, organization to use it, and of course you have a lot wider reach, and also you can get even more power to make decisions and also to make things happen.
That is true. And here we have the answers to the second poll.
Yeah. Okay, so very interesting. So, okay, 54% of you actually voted organizational culture as the most important capability. This also reflects our findings in the program. Organizational culture was definitely one of the capabilities highlighted as most important. So it's an indication that companies are really starting to realize also the massive sort of change management that is required to actually implement the circularity.
But even get started, right?
And even get started.
Point.
Yeah,
it's you need to get started, you need to get the buy-in, you need to get the strategy and the stakeholders involved on all levels of the company. So to get started, but also get moving. So.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah, and there's a comment on the other, but then we have, I mean, both on customer value delivery and also resource handling. I think this is also common capabilities that need to be invested in, because these are, many companies do not necessarily have these in-house. So it's something that needs to be also built up from the start. Yeah.
Yes.
And then we can launch our last question in terms of what kind of value could circular opportunities create for you? Is it more tangible value, such as revenue generation or cost reduction, or is this also intangible value, such as risk reduction or brand enhancement? So quick 1 minute on that as well.
Yes, thank you. And then perhaps also another question that we received is how adaptable is the playbook to government as opposed to individual businesses?
I think the playbook is very relevant for governments. We do see the governments as very important enablers for the circular economy. They need to also follow the progress as well. So I think it's a good way of actually helping governments understand what kind of challenges are companies facing, how are they working with circular economy, what are the barriers that they're facing, and how can I as a government actually help address this. So definitely important that the governments also get included on the journey and to really get that ecosystem approach. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps the last question before we have so does the playbook suggest a method for prioritizing circular models if multiple are identified, and how?
So I mean, it is possible, of course, to identify multiple business models, but what I would recommend there is to look at what is the sort of the business model that really address your most sort of your major inefficiencies in your value chain, sort of the most critical one. And then you also can, through the tool, assess the value. So you can assess the value of the different circular opportunities and then prioritize based on what kind of opportunity can bring me the most value.
Yes, and perhaps the value to your customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see, here we have the last poll as well.
Okay, interesting. So 50% of you have voted brand enhancement. So this is something that we definitely see that companies are starting to realize the need to actually change in front of your customers as well. So that's a very important value lever. And then you also have also some votes on revenue increase, cost reduction, and also risk reduction. But interesting to see that the majority also is brand enhancements. Yeah.
Yes, very, very interesting.
But it's
Yes. Well, perhaps we hope that you enjoyed this this presentation and that you learned a little bit more about the playbook. And on our website, in addition to the tools and the playbook itself, you can also find some videos explaining the different chapters in the playbook and some interviews with companies that have participated and have shared some of their thoughts regarding the playbook and the value, circular economy, the value it brings to them. So, but thank you very much to Hedda, you and Alexander, and to you, Jyri, as well. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and we will continue in the future, I'm sure. And also to see how we've managed to create this tool that is so valuable to companies, and now that we will start or continue sharing it. So thank you very much from here, from us. Thank you to you, Jyri, for sharing your insights. Thank you to you, Hedda, for sharing all your insights, and to you, Alexander, as well, for sharing your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marthe.
Thank you.
Bye.